My name is Ursuline, and I'm 29 years old. I was so excited about my engagement to Marcus Blackwell, heir to the prestigious Blackwell Hotel empire. His family seemed perfect from a distance, wealthy, influential, and respected in high society. But at our engagement party, the masks slipped. The whispers, the mockery, the condescension about my humble background. They had no idea who I really was. As CEO of Summit Capital, I had the power to change everything with one signature. And I did. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when others underestimated you. Now let me tell you how I cancelled a $950 million deal and left my almost in-laws in complete shock. I grew up in Cedar Springs, a small town in Michigan, where everyone knew each other by name. My father worked as a high school mathematics teacher, and my mother was a nurse at the local community hospital. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy. My parents stretched every dollar to make ends meet, clipping coupons and buying clothes on clearance. But what we lacked in financial resources, we made up for in love and determination. From an early age, my parents instilled in me the value of education. Your mind is the one thing no one can ever take from you, my father would say as he helped me with my math homework at our kitchen table. My mother would add, and hard work is the ladder that will take you wherever you want to go. I took their words to heart. In high school, I balanced academics with 3 part-time jobs, tutoring younger students, working weekends at the local bookstore, and helping my neighbor with her accounting during tax season. By graduation, I had saved enough for my first semester at State University and earned a partial scholarship that covered another portion of my tuition. College was transformative. I majored in finance with a minor in international business, discovering a natural aptitude for understanding market trends and investment strategies. My professors noticed too. Dr. Winters, my advanced finance professor, became a mentor and encouraged me to apply to the most prestigious MBA programs in the country. You have a rare combination of analytical skill and intuitive understanding of how businesses work, she told me during my senior year. Don't sell yourself short. With her recommendation and my stellar academic record, I was accepted to Harvard Business School with a fellowship that covered most of my expenses. The rest I paid for with student loans and by working as a research assistant. Business school was challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, I was surrounded by people from privileged backgrounds, students whose parents were CEOs, politicians, and old money aristocrats. I felt out of place in my sensible clothes among their designer wardrobes. My accent, which carried hints of my Midwestern upbringing, stood in stark contrast to their polished tones, but I refused to be intimidated. Instead, I channeled my energy into becoming the best student in every class. I stayed up later, prepared more thoroughly, and participated more thoughtfully than anyone else. Gradually, even the most entitled classmates began to respect my intellect, if not my background. After graduation, I accepted a position at Meridian Investments, a mid-sized firm in Chicago. I started at the bottom, analyzing potential investments and preparing reports for the senior managers. But I quickly distinguished myself by identifying several overlooked opportunities that turned into major profits for the company. Within 3 years, I had risen to become the youngest senior investment analyst in the firm's history. By 30, I had been headhunted by Summit Capital, one of the largest investment firms in the country. They offered me a position as director of acquisitions with a salary that made me call my mother in tears of disbelief. "You've earned this," she said simply. "You've always been destined for greatness, Ursuline." At Summit, my reputation for having a golden touch with investments grew even stronger. I orchestrated several high-profile acquisitions that dramatically increased the company's portfolio value. When our CEO announced his retirement, the board unanimously voted to offer me the position, making me one of the youngest female CEOs in the financial industry. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, stock options, and a level of influence I had never imagined possessing. But despite my professional success, my personal life had taken a back seat. 60-hour work weeks left little time for dating, and the few relationships I had attempted fizzled due to my commitment to my career. Then I met Marcus Blackwell at a charity gala in New York. I was there representing Summit Capital, which had donated a substantial amount to the Children's Hospital, being honored that evening. Marcus was seated at my table, and from the moment he smiled at me, I felt a connection I hadn't experienced before. He was handsome in a classic way, tall with dark hair, intelligent blue eyes, and a smile that transformed his serious face into something approachable and warm. He introduced himself simply as Marcus, with no mention of his family's hotel empire. I did the same, introducing myself as Ursuline Thompson, with no mention of my position at Summit Capital. It wasn't that I was deliberately hiding my success. It was more that I had grown tired of seeing people's expressions change when they realized who I was professionally. That night, I just wanted to be myself. Not a CEO, not a financial prodigy, just Ursuline. We talked for hours, first at the gala and then at a quiet bar nearby. Marcus was intelligent, well-read, and passionate about architecture, which he had studied before joining his family's business. He spoke about his dream of designing boutique hotels that blended seamlessly with their environments, creating experiences rather than just places to stay. By the end of the evening, I was thoroughly charmed. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Marcus took me to art exhibitions, obscure jazz clubs, and restaurants where the chefs knew him by name. We walked through Central Park in the rain, sharing an umbrella and stopping to kiss under the trees. He sent flowers to my apartment. Not extravagant arrangements, but thoughtful selections that matched our conversations. After our third date, I considered telling him about my position at Summit Capital. But then he mentioned that he worked for his family's hotel chain, without specifying which one or his exact role. I decided to follow his lead, keeping our conversations focused on our interests rather than our professional lives. 2 months into our relationship, Marcus invited me to a weekend at his family home upstate. It was only when we pulled up to a sprawling estate with manicured grounds and a gate bearing the Blackwell crest that I realized exactly who his family was. "You're that Blackwell?" I asked suddenly, understanding the magnitude of his understatement. He laughed a bit uncomfortably. "I wanted you to get to know me, not my family name," he explained. "People tend to act differently when they know." I understood completely, having experienced the same phenomenon. But as we entered the mansion and I was introduced to his parents, Catherine and Richard Blackwell, I decided to maintain my own partial anonymity. I mentioned that I worked in finance, but kept the details vague. The weekend was pleasant enough. Catherine was polite, if somewhat reserved, asking questions about my family and background with a detachment that suggested she was simply going through the motions. Richard was more engaged, especially when I made an insightful comment about a recent shift in the hotel industry. But there was an underlying current of evaluation, as if I was being silently measured against some invisible standard. Over the next 6 months, Marcus and I grew closer. He talked about his frustrations working under his father's shadow, his desire to bring fresh ideas to Blackwell hotels, and his passion for creating something meaningful with his life beyond simply inheriting a fortune. I shared my own dreams of making a positive impact through strategic investment in sustainable businesses without revealing the extent to which I was already doing exactly that. When Marcus proposed during a surprise trip to Kyoto, I was caught completely off guard. The ring was beautiful, an emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, elegant, without being ostentatious. In that moment, surrounded by the serenity of a Japanese garden with cherry blossoms floating on the breeze, I said yes, without hesitation. It was only on the flight home, as Marcus slept beside me, that I began to wonder how I would integrate my professional identity with my new role as a Blackwell bride-to-be. I decided to wait for the right moment to reveal the full extent of my career, perhaps after we had announced our engagement to both families. Little did I know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test not only our relationship, but my own sense of self-worth in ways I never could have anticipated. The engagement party was held at the Blackwell estate, the same sprawling mansion where I had first been introduced to Marcus's family. But this time, the house had been transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and status. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, illuminating arrangements of white orchids and roses that must have cost thousands of dollars. Waitstaff in formal attire, circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres created by a celebrity chef flown in for the occasion. I wore a navy blue dress that I had carefully selected for the event. Designer, but not flashy elegant, but not trying too hard. My mother had helped me choose it during a special shopping trip to New York, both of us giddy with excitement about the engagement. "You look beautiful, darling," my mother had said as I emerged from the fitting room. "Like you belong anywhere you choose to be." Those words echoed in my mind as I stood beside Marcus, greeting a seemingly endless parade of his family's friends, business associates, and distant relatives. Most were polite, offering congratulations and welcome to the family pleasantries. But I couldn't miss the evaluating glances, the subtle up and down looks that took in my appearance and found it somehow wanting. I was introduced to Marcus's siblings for the first time that evening. His brother Blake was 2 years younger with the same dark hair, but none of the warmth in his eyes. He gripped my hand a bit too firmly when we were introduced. "So you're the one who finally caught my brother," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Impressive. What did you say you do again?" Before I could answer, his sister Vivian stepped forward. She was strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate updo that complemented her blush-coloured gown. She air-kissed my cheek, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. "We were starting to think Marcus would never settle down," she said, glancing at her brother with a meaningful look, especially after what happened with Alessandra. "Vivian," Marcus said sharply, his hand tightening on my waist. "Not now." I made a mental note to ask about Alessandra later, but the moment was interrupted by the arrival of my parents. They looked slightly out of place among the glittering crowd. My father in his best suit, which I knew he had owned for at least a decade, and my mother in a simple but elegant dress she had splurged on for the occasion. I broke away from Marcus to embrace them, feeling a rush of love and gratitude for their presence. "Mum, Dad, I'm so glad you're here," I said, linking arms with my mother. "Let me introduce you to Marcus's parents." And I led them toward Catherine and Richard, who were holding court near the grand staircase. As we approached, I saw Catherine's eyes flicker over my parents, taking in my father's slightly outdated suit and my mother's costume jewelry. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, how lovely to meet you," Catherine said, extending her hand with practiced grace. "Welcome to our home." "Thank you for having us," my father replied warmly. "And please call me David. This is my wife, Susan." "What a beautiful home you have," my mother added, looking around with genuine appreciation. "The architecture is stunning." "Yes, it's been in the Blackwell family for 3 generations, Catherine replied. "Though, of course, we've updated it extensively. Richard's grandfather built it after establishing the first Blackwell Hotel in 1923. "That's quite a legacy," my father said. Richard nodded. "One that Marcus will be responsible for continuing." He glanced at me. "Along with starting a family of his own, of course." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Catherine asking polite but distant questions about my hometown and my parents' occupations. When she learned my father was a teacher and my mother a nurse, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How commendable," she said. "Public service is so important." As the evening progressed, I found myself separated from both Marcus and my parents, pulled into conversations with various Blackwell relatives and friends. It was during one such moment, as I was speaking with an elderly aunt of Marcus's, that I overheard Catherine's voice from behind a large floral arrangement. "I just don't understand what Marcus sees in her," she was saying to someone. "She's pretty enough, I suppose, but hardly Blackwell material. Did you see her parents? A teacher and a nurse from some tiny town no one's ever heard of." "Perhaps she's good in bed," a male voice replied with a chuckle. I recognized it as Blake's. "Or maybe she's pregnant." "Blake really," Catherine admonished, though I could hear the amusement in her voice. "Though I suppose we should consider that possibility. Why else would Marcus rush into this after only 8 months, especially after Alessandra?" "Well, at least Alessandra came from the right kind of family," another female voice added. "Vivian. This one screams gold digger to me. Did you notice how she keeps looking at everything? I swear I saw her checking the label on the champagne bottle." I felt my cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I had been doing no such thing, and the suggestion that I was after Marcus's money was both insulting and ironic, given my own financial success. I stepped away quietly, not wanting to confront them in the middle of the engagement party. When I found Marcus again, he was deep in conversation with some business associates of his father's. "Ah, here she is," he said, pulling me close. "Gentlemen, this is my fiancé, Ursuline Thompson." The men shook my hand with varying degrees of interest. One of them, an older gentleman with silver hair and sharp eyes, held my gaze a bit longer than the others. "Thompson," he repeated. "Any relation to Summit Capital? I heard their new CEO is a woman named Thompson." My heart skipped a beat. This was exactly the kind of coincidence I had been hoping to avoid, until I had a chance to explain things to Marcus properly. "No relation," I said smoothly. "It's a common name." The man nodded, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. I steered the conversation towards safer topics, asking about the latest developments in the hotel industry, and watching as Marcus expertly discussed occupancy rates and expansion strategies. Later that night, as we lay in bed in Marcus's old room at the estate, I considered telling him what I had overheard. But he was so happy, so full of plans for our future, that I couldn't bring myself to dampen his mood. "My parents adore you," he said, stroking my hair. "Especially my father. He was impressed by your questions about the business." I knew this wasn't entirely true, but I smiled anyway. "They seem very proud of their legacy. It's been their whole life," Marcus agreed. "And now it will be part of ours too." As I drifted off to sleep, I told myself that things would improve once his family got to know me better, that the snippets of conversation I had overheard were just initial reservations that would dissipate over time, that once we were married, I would reveal my position at Summit Capital and they would see that I wasn't after the Blackwell fortune. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next few months were a crash course in just how cruel the Blackwells could be. What had started as subtle digs and backhanded compliments at the engagement party evolved into a sustained campaign of undermining and exclusion, all orchestrated by Catherine, with enthusiastic support from Blake and Vivian. Wedding planning became the perfect vehicle for Catherine's particular brand of torment. Despite my gentle attempts to be involved in the decisions, she steamrolled over every suggestion I made. "Oh, darling," she said, when I mentioned preferring a smaller, more intimate ceremony that simply won't do for a Blackwell wedding. "We have connections and obligations. The governor will be attending, not to mention at least 3 senators." When I showed her a photo of a wedding dress I had fallen in love with, a simple, elegant design from a boutique designer, she pursed her lips. "That's sweet," she said, "but I've already scheduled appointments with Vera Wang and Oscar de la Renta. The Blackwell bride will be featured in Vogue after all." Every decision was made this way. The venue, the grandest ballroom in the Blackwell's flagship New York hotel, the flowers, imported peonies regardless of the season, the guest list, 500 people, most of whom I had never met. My preferences were acknowledged and then promptly ignored. But it wasn't just the wedding planning. Catherine began making comments about my appearance, suggesting I should consider fixing my slight Midwestern accent, recommending her plastic surgeon for a tiny adjustment to my nose, insisting I needed a more sophisticated haircut to elevate my look. "You're going to be representing the Blackwell name now," she reminded me constantly. "Appearance is everything in our circle." Richard was less openly critical, but equally dismissive in his own way. During family dinners, any comment I made about business or finance was met with a patronizing smile. "That's an interesting perspective," he would say in a tone that suggested it was anything but, though perhaps a bit simplistic. The reality of high-level business is more complex than it appears from the outside. If only he knew that I was currently overseeing a portfolio worth billions, making acquisition decisions that shaped entire industries. But I had maintained my semi-anonymity, partly out of a desire to be loved for myself rather than my position, and partly because I was increasingly concerned about how Marcus would react to learning I had not been completely forthcoming. Blake was the most openly hostile. At a family dinner about 2 months after our engagement, he made a joke that crossed all lines of decency. "So, Ursuline," he said, swirling his expensive bourbon, "tell us more about Cedar Springs. Do people there still marry their cousins, or has civilization finally reached the Midwest?" There was a moment of shocked silence before Vivian burst into laughter. Richard coughed uncomfortably, but said nothing. Catherine's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "And Marcus," he chuckled. Not full-throated laughter like his sister, but a small complicit chuckle that cut me more deeply than Blake's crude joke ever could. "Very funny, Blake," Marcus said, squeezing my hand under the table as if in apology. But the damage was done. That night I confronted him about it in our hotel room. "Why didn't you stand up for me?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Your brother basically called my hometown a backwater filled with inbreds, and you laughed." Marcus sighed, loosening his tie. "He was just joking, Ursuline. Blake has a weird sense of humor sometimes. He didn't mean anything by it." "He absolutely did mean something by it," I insisted. "And so did your mother when she suggested I need elocution lessons, and your father when he dismissed my comment about hotel occupancy trends as if I couldn't possibly understand business." "They're just getting used to you," Marcus said, his tone placating. "You have to understand our families are very different. They had certain expectations about who I would marry. Like Alessandra?" I asked, the name slipping out before I could stop myself. Marcus froze. "Who told you about Alessandra?" "Vivian mentioned her at the engagement party." "Who is she?" He ran a hand through his hair. "My ex-fiancé. We were engaged for about a year, but it didn't work out." "Why not?" "We wanted different things," he said vaguely. She was very focused on her social standing, on what being a Blackwell meant in terms of status. That's not what I wanted. "And your family, did they approve of her?" The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know. They thought she was a good match, he admitted. Her family has been in New York society for generations, but that doesn't matter to me. I chose you, Ursuline. You're the one I love. I wanted to believe him. And part of me did. When we were alone together away from his family's influence, Marcus was still the kind, thoughtful man I had fallen in love with. But increasingly, I was seeing another side of him, the side that had been shaped by years of Blackwell expectations and entitlement. Meanwhile, at Summit Capital, a significant opportunity had landed on my desk. Horizon Hotels. A major competitor to the Blackwell chain was struggling financially and looking for investors or buyers. Their portfolio included properties in key locations that would complement Summit's existing investments in commercial real estate. The potential acquisition was valued at approximately $950 million, a substantial deal even for a firm of Summit's size. What made it particularly interesting was that Horizon and Blackwell had been rivals for decades, with Richard Blackwell and Horizon's founder, George Mercer, engaged in a well-documented feud. Acquiring Horizon would not only be a sound business decision for Summit, it would also give the struggling hotel chain the capital injection it needed to compete more effectively with Blackwell Hotels. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, that I, soon to be a Blackwell by marriage, would be in a position to strengthen their biggest competitor. I assigned my best team to perform due diligence on the potential acquisition, keeping my personal connection to the Blackwells strictly confidential. The more they dug into Horizon's financials and operations, the more convinced I became that this was a smart investment. With the right management and strategic positioning, Horizon could not only recover, but thrive. As the wedding drew closer and the Horizon deal progressed, I found myself living in two increasingly separate worlds. My professional life, where I was respected and valued for my expertise, and my personal life, where I was constantly belittled and undermined by my future in-laws. The breaking point was approaching faster than I realized. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Blackwell Country Club, an exclusive establishment where membership was by invitation only and the waiting list was rumored to be decades long. The ballroom had been transformed for the occasion with tasteful floral arrangements and soft lighting, creating an atmosphere of understated luxury. I arrived with Marcus wearing a silk dress in a deep emerald color that complemented my auburn hair and fair skin. I had chosen it carefully, knowing that Catherine would be scrutinizing my appearance as always. For once, I wanted to be beyond reproach. As we entered, Catherine approached wearing a designer gown that probably cost more than my parents' car. She ear-kissed my cheek, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. "Ursuline, darling," she said, her eyes scanning my outfit. "That color is certainly bold. I would have expected something more subtle for a rehearsal dinner, but I suppose it makes a statement." Before I could respond, she had turned away to greet another guest. Marcus squeezed my hand reassuringly, but I noticed he didn't contradict his mother or defend my choice. The seating arrangement was the first indication that this evening would be particularly challenging. My parents had been placed at a table far from the main party along with some distant Blackwell cousins and a few junior employees from the hotel chain. Meanwhile, Marcus and I were seated at the head table with his parents' siblings and several prominent business associates. "I requested that your parents be seated with us," I whispered to Marcus as we made our way to our places. "Mother thought it would be more comfortable for them to be with people they might have more in common with," he replied. "You know how overwhelming these events can be for outsiders." The word outsiders stung. After nearly a year together and months of planning this wedding, my parents were still considered outsiders by the Blackwells. As dinner was served, I noticed that the waiters seemed to be following a specific pattern. Catherine was served first, then Richard, then the rest of the head table, in order of perceived importance. I was served last, the waiter's expression neutral, but his timing unmistakable. This wasn't an accident. It was a choreographed slight. The toasts began midway through the meal. Richard spoke about the Blackwell legacy and how Marcus would carry it forward. Catherine gave a carefully worded speech about welcoming a new member to the family, though her tone suggested she was doing so under duress. Blake's toast was ostensibly humorous, but laced with subtle digs about my background. Then Catherine stood again, tapping her crystal glass for attention. "I'd like to say a few more words about our dear Ursuline," she announced, her smile not reaching her eyes. When Marcus first told us about the girl he was dating, I must admit we were surprised. She wasn't quite what we had envisioned for our son. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the room. But as we've gotten to know her, we've come to appreciate her unique qualities. and while she may not have been born into our world, she is certainly lucky to be joining it. To Ursuline, may she grow to appreciate the privilege of becoming a Blackwell. Glasses were raised around the room, but I felt sick to my stomach. The toast wasn't a welcome. It was a statement of ownership, of condescension, barely disguised as acceptance. As dessert was being served, Blake leaned across the table, his words slightly slurred from too much champagne. "So sis-to-be," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "did Marcus tell you about the prenup yet? Dad's lawyers really outdid themselves this time. Every possible scenario covered. Divorce, children, infidelity. The Blackwell assets are locked up tighter than Fort Knox." Richard shot his son a warning look, but Blake continued. "Don't worry though, you'll get a generous allowance, as long as you behave yourself, of course." Marcus placed a hand on his brother's arm. "Blake, that's enough. Those details are private." "Just looking out for family interests," Blake replied with a smirk. "Someone has to." I excused myself and headed to the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect myself. As I was about to return to the ballroom, I overheard voices from a small alcove nearby. I recognized them immediately, Marcus and his father. "Son, are you absolutely certain about this marriage?" Richard was asking. "There's still time to reconsider. No one would blame you for having second thoughts." "Dad, I've told you, I love Ursuline. Love is all well and good, but marriage, especially a Blackwell marriage, is about more than that. It's about suitable partnerships, about maintaining our position. Alessandra's family was devastated when you broke things off, and they would welcome you back in a heartbeat." "I'm marrying Ursuline," Marcus insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Richard sighed. "I just worry that she doesn't fit with us. The way she speaks, her background, her lack of social connections. These things matter in our world, Marcus. I'm not saying she's not a lovely girl, but is she really Blackwell material?" There was a pause before Marcus responded. "Sometimes I do wonder if she'll ever truly fit in. If I'm being honest, I've had moments of doubt. She's so different from everyone in our circle. My heart felt like it had been pierced by a shard of ice. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was admitting to his father that he had doubts about me based on my perceived social status. I was about to step forward to confront them both when I heard someone call my name. I turned to find Dr. Sarah Winters, my mentor from college, approaching with a wide smile. "Ursuline, I thought that was you. What a wonderful surprise." I embraced her, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. "Dr. Winters, what are you doing here?" "I'm a friend of the Mercer family. George Mercer's wife was my roommate in college. I'm in town for a conference, and they invited me to join them for dinner. Their table is just over there." She gestured toward a group seated on the opposite side of the ballroom. "But I spotted you and had to come say hello. I've been following your career with such pride." I felt a flash of panic. Dr. Winters knew exactly what I did for a living. She had written one of my recommendations for the CEO position at Summit Capital. "It's wonderful to see you," I said quickly, "but I should really get back to my fiancé." "Of course, I just wanted to congratulate you on both the engagement and the Horizon Hotels deal everyone's talking about. Summit Capital's youngest CEO making power moves. Though I imagine it creates some interesting dinner conversation with your future in-laws." She laughed. I froze. "Dr. Winters, I'd appreciate your discretion about my position. The Blackwells don't actually know about my role at Summit." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "They don't know you're the CEO of one of the largest investment firms in the country, but why on earth would you keep that a secret?" Before I could answer, Vivian appeared beside us, her expression curious. "Ursuline, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" She was clutching her phone, no doubt ready to document the interaction for her social media followers. "Vivian, this is Dr. Sarah Winters, my former professor. Dr. Winters, this is Vivian Blackwell, Marcus's sister." Dr. Winters shook Vivian's hand. "Lovely to meet you. You must be so excited about the wedding." "Oh, absolutely," Vivian replied with a false smile. "We're all just thrilled to welcome Ursuline into the family. It's been quite the adjustment for everyone." Dr. Winters looked between us, sensing the tension. "Well, I won't keep you. Congratulations again, Ursuline. The business world is watching your next move with great interest." As she walked away, Vivian turned to me with narrowed eyes. "What was that about? What business world?" "Nothing important," I said, attempting to move past her. "Just catching up with an old professor." "She seemed to think you're someone significant," Vivian pressed in. "What exactly do you do in finance, Ursuline? You've always been so vague about it." "I really should get back to Marcus," I said, ignoring her question. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I went through the motions, smiling at appropriate moments, making small talk with wedding guests, playing the part of the grateful bride-to-be. But inside, something had shifted. The cumulative effect of the seating arrangement, Catherine's toast, Blake's comments about the prenup, and most devastatingly overhearing Marcus's admission of doubt. It was all too much. As Marcus and I rode back to the hotel in silence, I knew I had a decision to make. A decision that would affect not only my personal happiness, but potentially the future of 2 major hotel chains and hundreds of millions of dollars in business deals. I spent that night alone in our suite, Marcus having gone out for drinks with his groomsmen after dropping me off. As I stared at the ceiling, my mind raced with possibilities and plans. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I spent the day after the rehearsal dinner in a state of intense focus, the kind that had served me well throughout my career. Marcus had texted to say he was spending the day with his father and brother reviewing some business matters before the wedding. This gave me the time and space I needed to put my plan into action. First, I called my executive assistant at Summit Capital. Janet, I need you to gather the team for an emergency meeting this afternoon. We're going to accelerate the timeline on the Horizon acquisition. The due diligence isn't quite complete, Janet reminded me. We still have 2 weeks in our projected timeline. I'm aware, but circumstances have changed. I need all the final documentation prepared for signature by tomorrow morning. And Janet, this stays completely confidential. No leaks, no press releases, nothing until I give the word. Next, I called my mentor, Dr. Winters. I'm sorry about last night, I began. I put you in an awkward position. Not at all, she replied. But I am concerned about you. Why haven't you told your fiancé and his family about your position, especially given that you're about to acquire their biggest competitor? I sighed, finally, voicing the thoughts that had been forming over the past several months. I wanted Marcus to love me for who I am, not what I am. But I've realized that the Blackwells don't see me at all. They only see my background, my perceived lack of status. They've decided I'm beneath them, and nothing I do will ever change that. And Marcus? Does he defend you against this treatment? The memory of his words to his father flooded back. Not effectively. I think he shares some of their doubts about me. Then he doesn't deserve you, Dr. Winters said firmly. You are brilliant, accomplished, and compassionate. Anyone who can't see your worth doesn't belong in your life. Her words strengthened my resolve. I've made a decision. I'm going to reveal my position at the pre-wedding brunch tomorrow, and I'm going to sign the Horizon acquisition deal beforehand. That's going to cause quite a stir in the business world, she noted. The Blackwells and Mercers have been rivals for decades. It's a sound business decision, I replied. Horizon has excellent properties and management potential. With Summit's investment, they could become the market leader within 5 years. And the timing of this revelation, that's a personal decision. Yes, I admitted. I want the Blackwells to understand exactly who they've been mocking and dismissing. I want them to know what they're losing. After hanging up, I called my parents. They had been increasingly concerned about the way the Blackwells treated me, though I had downplayed it to spare them worry. Mum, Dad, I need to tell you something important, I said when they were both on the line. I'm considering calling off the wedding. There was a moment of silence before my father spoke. This is about the way his family treats you, isn't it? Yes, I said, relieved that they understood. But it's also about Marcus. He doesn't stand up for me, and yesterday I overheard him telling his father that he has doubts about whether I'll ever fit into their world. Oh, sweetheart, my mother said softly. I'm so sorry. We noticed how they were at the rehearsal dinner, putting us at that far table, the way his mother spoke about you and her toast. But we didn't want to say anything that would upset you. What are you going to do? My father asked. How can we help? I explained my plan to reveal my position at Summit Capital and to finalize the Horizon deal before the brunch. I want you both there when I do it. Not to gloat or be vindictive, but because I need your support. We'll be there, my father promised. Whatever you decide, we're behind you 100%. With my support system in place, I headed to Summit Capital's offices. My team was waiting, puzzled by the urgent meeting, but ready to work. We're accelerating the Horizon acquisition, I announced. I want all documentation ready for signature by tomorrow morning. My CFO frowned. Ursuline, while the deal looks solid, rushing like this isn't our usual approach. Is there something we should know? I took a deep breath. Yes, I'm personally connected to the Blackwell family. I've been engaged to Marcus Blackwell. That engagement is likely ending, and I want this deal completed before that happens. A stunned silence filled the room. This isn't about revenge, I clarified. The acquisition makes sense strategically and financially, but the timeline has become more urgent for personal reasons. I understand if any of you have concerns about the ethics of this situation, and I'm open to discussing them. My general counsel spoke up. From a legal perspective, there's no conflict of interest. You have no financial stake in Blackwell Hotels, and your personal relationship doesn't create a duty to them. As long as the acquisition serves Summit's interests and our investors' interests, we're on solid ground. The team rallied, working through the night to finalize the deal. By morning, I had the complete acquisition package ready for signature. George Mercer, Horizon's founder, had agreed to an early morning meeting to sign his part of the agreement. As I sat across from him in Summit's conference room, he studied me with curious eyes. I have to admit, Ms. Thompson, when my assistant told me the CEO of Summit wanted to meet at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, I was intrigued. When she mentioned it was about accelerating our deal, I was positively fascinated. I smiled. Thank you for accommodating the unusual timing, Mr. Mercer. As I mentioned, certain factors have made the timeline more pressing. He nodded, signing the final document with a flourish. My sources tell me you're engaged to Marcus Blackwell. That must make for interesting pillow talk. Not for much longer, I replied. In fact, the Blackwell family is about to learn about my position and this acquisition at their pre-wedding brunch in approximately 3 hours. George Mercer threw back his head and laughed. Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that Richard Blackwell has been trying to undermine my company for 20 years. The idea that his almost daughter-in-law is the one who saved it. That's poetic justice of the highest order. With the deal signed, I returned to my apartment to prepare for what would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult confrontations of my life. I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored white suit that projected confidence and authority. I arranged for my executive team to arrive at the brunch venue separately, ready to enter when I texted them. And I rehearsed exactly what I wanted to say, determined to maintain my dignity while making my position clear. As I slipped the engagement ring off my finger and placed it in my purse, I felt a mixture of sadness and resolution. I had loved Marcus. Perhaps I still did. But I could no longer ignore the evidence that he didn't truly accept me for who I was, nor could he stand up to his family on my behalf. It was time to stand up for myself. The pre-wedding brunch was being held at the rooftop restaurant of the Blackwell's flagship Manhattan hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline, and the space had been decorated with the same tasteful elegance that characterized all Blackwell events. I arrived with my parents, who had insisted on being by my side for moral support. Catherine greeted us at the entrance, her smile tightening when she saw my white suit. Ursuline Darling White is traditionally reserved for the bride on her wedding day. She said, her tone suggesting I had committed a grave social error. Though I suppose you couldn't have known that. I'm aware of the tradition, Catherine, I replied calmly. I chose this outfit deliberately. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she turned to welcome another arriving guest before she could respond further. Marcus approached, looking handsome in a light grey suit. He kissed my cheek. You look beautiful, he said. Though Mother seems upset about your choice of colour. Yes, she mentioned that, I replied. We'll discuss it later. The brunch proceeded with the usual Blackwell precision. Champagne flowed freely, a string quartet played softly in the background, and waiters circulated with trays of gourmet breakfast items. I noticed that several of Richard's business associates were present, including members of the Blackwell Hotel's board of directors. My parents were once again seated at a table far from the centre of activity, though this time they seemed almost relieved by the distance. They knew what was coming and understood their role was simply to be present and supportive. Midway through the meal, Richard stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room quieted as he began to speak. Friends, family, colleagues, thank you for joining us to celebrate the upcoming union of my son Marcus and his fiancée Ursuline. As many of you know, Blackwell Hotels is preparing for an exciting expansion in the coming year. We've identified key markets in Asia and Europe, and we're finalizing plans for a new ultra-luxury brand targeting the most discerning travelers. There were appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Richard continued, his voice confident and commanding. In fact, just yesterday, we received word that one of our competitors is facing significant financial difficulties, which presents a potential acquisition opportunity for us. I won't name names, but let's just say that sometimes the market corrects itself in our favor. I knew he was referring to the rumors about Horizon Hotels. Rumors that were now obsolete since I had signed the acquisition papers that morning. As Richard finished his remarks, Catherine stood to add her own thoughts. Her speech was ostensibly about welcoming me to the family, but was laced with subtle digs about my background and potential for growth under her guidance. Then Blake rose, champagne glass in hand. To my brother and his interesting choice of bride, he began his tone, making it clear that interesting was not a compliment. While she may not have the pedigree we expected for a Blackwell wife, Ursuline has other qualities that clearly appealed to Marcus. There were uncomfortable laughs from some guests, while others shifted awkwardly in their seats. Marcus frowned but said nothing. To Ursuline, Blake continued, raising his glass higher. May she appreciate the extraordinary good fortune that has brought her into our family and rescued her from mediocrity. As glasses were raised around the room, I felt a calm determination settle over me. I stood, smoothing the front of my white suit. Thank you, Blake, for that illuminating toast. I said, my voice clear and steady. I'd like to say a few words if I may. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me with curiosity. Catherine looked alarmed, while Richard appeared mildly annoyed at the unscheduled addition to the program. For the past year, I have been engaged to Marcus Blackwell. During that time, I have been subjected to constant belittlement, condescension, and outright mockery from the Blackwell family. My background, my accent, my parents' occupations, all have been deemed insufficient by the exacting standards of Blackwell acceptability. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Marcus reached for my hand, but I gently moved it away. I entered this relationship with an open heart, hoping to be judged on my character rather than my perceived social standing. But again and again I have been found wanting, not because of any personal failing, but because I wasn't born into the right family or the right social circle. I turned to face Catherine directly. You've made it abundantly clear that you don't consider me Blackwell material. You've questioned my intelligence, my manners, my very worth as a human being, and you've done it all with a smile behind a veneer of politeness that makes it impossible to directly challenge. Catherine's face had gone pale. Richard stood, clearly intending to interrupt, but I continued before he could speak. What none of you bothered to discover is who I actually am. You are so convinced of your own superiority that it never occurred to you to look beyond your assumptions. I paused, making eye contact with several key people around the room. My name is Ursuline Thompson. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Summit Capital, one of the largest investment firms in the country. I oversee a portfolio worth billions of dollars and make acquisition decisions that shape entire industries. I graduated at the top of my class from Harvard Business School. I am by any objective measure extremely successful in my field. The silence in the room was absolute. I could see shock on Catherine's face, confusion on Blake's, and dawning comprehension on Richard's. This morning, I signed the final documents for Summit Capital's acquisition of Horizon Hotels in a deal valued at $950 million. We will be retaining the current management team and investing significantly in property renovations and expansion. Our analysts project that within 5 years, Horizon will be the market leader in the luxury hotel sector, surpassing Blackwell Hotels in both revenue and prestige. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. That's impossible, he spluttered. Horizon was negotiating with several potential buyers. We had intelligence that they were weeks away from any deal. The timeline was accelerated, I replied calmly. As if on cue, the doors to the restaurant opened and my executive team from Summit Capital entered, led by my CFO and General Counsel. These are my colleagues who can confirm every detail of the acquisition. I turned back to the stunned crowd. I kept my professional identity private because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I am. I now realize that was a mistake. I should have been honest from the beginning, and I take responsibility for that decision. But the contempt and cruelty I have experienced from the Blackwell family is inexcusable, regardless of my job title or bank account. Finally, I faced Marcus, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something else, perhaps a dawning realization of what he was about to lose. Marcus, I loved you. Part of me still does, but I cannot and will not marry someone who won't stand up for me, who harbors doubts about my worthiness, based on criteria as meaningless as social status. You told your father you weren't sure I would ever truly fit into your world. Well, I've decided I don't want to. My world is bigger, more inclusive, and frankly more interesting than the narrow confines of Blackwell society. I reached into my purse and removed the engagement ring, placing it gently on the table in front of him. I release you from any obligation to me. I hope you find someone who meets with your family's approval and brings you happiness. With that, I signaled to my parents, who stood and moved to join me. My Summit Capital team stood respectfully by the door, ready to accompany us out. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't help noticing the varied reactions around the room. Catherine appeared shell-shocked, her carefully constructed world of social hierarchies crumbling around her. Richard was rapidly turning from disbelief to calculation, no doubt already thinking about the business implications of my revelation. Blake looked like someone had punched him in the stomach, while Vivian was frantically tapping on her phone, perhaps already crafting a social media post to distance herself from the debacle. And Marcus, he sat frozen, the engagement ring glittering on the table before him, his expression unreadable. In that moment, I felt a fleeting sadness for what might have been, had he been strong enough to break free from his family's toxic expectations. As we exited the restaurant, my mother squeezed my hand. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. My father nodded in agreement. "You stood up not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than because of where they come from." With my parents on one side and my executive team on the other, I left the Blackwell Hotel for the last time, my head held high and my heart, though bruised, finally free. The aftermath of my revelation at the Blackwell pre-wedding brunch rippled through both the social and business worlds with unexpected speed and intensity. By that afternoon, news of the cancelled wedding and the Summit Capital acquisition of Horizon Hotels had reached the financial press. By evening, it was trending on social media. Blackwell bride-to-be revealed as Summit CEO cancels wedding and acquires family's rival, read one headline. Power move: how Ursuline Thompson turned the tables on America's hotel dynasty, proclaimed another. I issued a brief statement through Summit's public relations department confirming the acquisition but declining to comment on personal matters. The Blackwells, normally quick to control their public narrative, remained uncharacteristically silent. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, focusing on the integration of Horizon Hotels into Summit's portfolio. The business aspects of the situation were straightforward. Our teams had done thorough due diligence, and the acquisition was sound from a financial perspective. But I couldn't entirely escape the emotional fallout. Marcus called repeatedly during the first week. I eventually agreed to meet him for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe far from both our usual haunts. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, and his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "You could have told me," he said as soon as we were seated. "About your job, your success. Did you not trust me?" "It wasn't about trust, not initially," I replied honestly. When we first met, I was enjoying being seen for myself, not my position. As time went on, it became more complicated. I saw how your family treated me, how they assumed I was beneath you because of my background. I suppose I wanted to see if you would defend me without knowing about my professional success. And I failed that test, he said quietly. "Yes," I acknowledged. "You did." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had once found endearing. "My father's livid about the Horizon deal. He thinks you used your relationship with me to gather inside information about Blackwell Hotels." Again, I shook my head. "That's not true, and any investigation would prove it. The Horizon acquisition was based entirely on their merits as a business. The fact that they're your family's competitor is coincidental, though I won't deny that the timing of the announcement was deliberately chosen for maximum impact." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It certainly had that. Blake's been uncharacteristically quiet, and Mother has barely left her room. She cancelled her standing appointments at the spa, which might be the most shocking development of all. Despite everything, I laughed. It felt good, a momentary release of tension. "I did love you, Ursuline," Marcus said, his expression turning serious again. "That wasn't a lie." "I believe you," I said. "But you loved a version of me that you thought needed rescue elevation to your social standing. You weren't prepared to love someone who was already your equal, or in some ways your superior. And you certainly weren't prepared to stand up to your family for me." He couldn't deny it. After an awkward silence, he asked, "What happens now with Horizon with Blackwell Hotels?" "Business continues," I said simply. "Summit will invest in Horizon, modernize their properties, expand their reach. Blackwell Hotels will remain a competitor. The market is big enough for both to succeed, though your father may need to reconsider some of his more outdated business practices." We parted with a handshake that felt both final and appropriate. As I watched him walk away, I realized that I felt more relief than regret. The right decision often feels that way. Difficult, but ultimately unburdening. The business press continued to follow the story, particularly as Summit's investment in Horizon began to show results. Within 6 months, Horizon's occupancy rates had increased by 15%, and their customer satisfaction scores were the highest in the industry. Richard Blackwell was forced to publicly acknowledge the competitive threat during a shareholders' meeting, a concession that must have been bitter indeed. Catherine made a few attempts to salvage her social standing by spreading rumours about me, but they gained little traction in a world where my professional success was now well documented. Several of her friends, sensing a shift in the social winds, began accepting invitations to events sponsored by Summit Capital. The ultimate irony came when Vivian approached me at a charity gala asking if I might consider her for a position at Summit. I referred her to our Human Resources department with the suggestion that she start by learning what actual work entails. As for me, the experience changed me in ways both subtle and profound. I became more open about my success, realizing that hiding it had been a form of internalized shame that I didn't deserve to carry. I established a scholarship program for business students from disadvantaged backgrounds, funding not just their education, but also providing mentorship and networking opportunities, typically reserved for the well-connected. At Summit, I implemented new policies that valued diversity of thought and background, recognizing that some of our best ideas came from people whose perspectives had been shaped by overcoming obstacles. Our profits increased, our workplace culture improved, and our reputation in the industry soared. On a personal level, I learnt to be more discerning about the people I allowed into my life. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth to anyone, not to wealthy families like the Blackwells, not to romantic partners, not even to myself. I knew who I was and what I had accomplished, and that knowledge provided a foundation of confidence that no external validation could match. About a year after the cancelled wedding, I met someone new, a professor of environmental science who was consulting on Summit's sustainable investment initiatives. Daniel was intelligent, kind, and refreshingly direct. On our third date, I told him everything about my position at Summit and the Blackwell debacle. He listened attentively, then simply said, "Their loss was apparently my gain." We've been together ever since, building a relationship based on mutual respect and admiration that feels more authentic than anything I experienced with Marcus. Looking back now, I can see that the entire Blackwell experience was a necessary if painful chapter in my life. It taught me that true self-worth comes not from external validation, but from living authentically and standing up for yourself when necessary. It showed me that success, while satisfying, is hollow without personal integrity. And it reminded me that where you come from shapes but does not define you. It's what you do with your opportunities that matters. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had revealed my position as Summit's CEO earlier in my relationship with Marcus. Would the Blackwells have treated me differently? Almost certainly. Would that have made for a healthier relationship? I doubt it. Their respect would have been based on my wealth and power, not on who I was as a person. And that kind of conditional acceptance is ultimately no acceptance at all. So if you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel less than because of your background, your accent, your parents' occupations, or any other arbitrary measure of worth, remember this: your value is not determined by those who would diminish you. It's determined by your character, your actions, your courage to live authentically in a world that often rewards conformity. Have you ever had to stand up to people who underestimated you? How did it feel to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they are enough exactly as they are. Thank you for listening, and may you always know your true worth regardless of who fails to see it.